So something major just happened today because the CDC has finally announced a change in guidelines to their 5-day isolation period. This is huge news. I'm going to break down what the CDC is now recommending, but also explain why they're making the changes at this time. Just so you know, it's a little bit shocking, but there are multiple reports and have been multiple reports that the CDC was going to follow what California has been doing, because California got rid of the 5-day isolation guidelines a while ago, and guess what? They didn't see an increase in hospitalizations and didn't see an increase in rates. So right there, the CDC is just following what California has already done. I will break down what's going on, exactly how this is going to pan out, what this means for you and I moving forward, and all of that in just a moment. All I ask is one thing. It takes 2 seconds. Go ahead, hit that like button if you enjoy these daily updates. And now let's begin. So for the past 4 or 5 months, I've been hearing a lot of rumors that the CDC was specifically looking at California and what California has done to try to keep people from spreading COVID. Well, here's what the CDC has just announced. The CDC has dropped its 5-day COVID isolation guidelines. And I want to explain why this is, but we're going to dive into this article right here. Now, let's just start reading. First, it says people would no longer be expected to isolate themselves for 5 days. Instead, what the CDC is recommending is that they go back to their normal schedule, and if they are free of a fever for at least 24 hours without taking any medication, they can go back to work, they can go back to school, and they can live their normal life. They do not have to isolate. And there's reasons to this. Now, they say this is very similar to the recommendations for other respiratory viruses, such as the influenza and RSV. Now, I want to break down why. This is the most common question I get, is why is the CDC going to make changes now? Is it because of the election? Well, no. What we have found out recently is that the CDC has previously, they were following the science. And this last recommendation where they went from the 10-day isolation period to the 5-day, this was back in 2021, 3 years ago. So the CDC has stuck with this same guideline for the past 3 years. However, it has been proven that they were not following the science. Now, I want to read some things to you. Okay? In this article, they're listing 3 reasons why the CDC is changing its isolation guidelines now. And I want to read those to you. Look at this first one. It says first, and this is probably one of the biggest ones right here. It says the current dominant variant nationwide is JN.1, which is responsible for more than 90% of cases, but it doesn't appear to be causing more severe illnesses than previous strains. That's interesting. So the JN.1 is not any more severe. It could potentially be less severe than some of the previous strains that we originally had. And then we had more strict isolation guidelines. Well, we need to change that. That's exactly what they're doing. The second reason why, they say because this increase of hybrid immunity for COVID because of higher vaccination rates, a little bit, and more exposure to the virus. That's one of the big ones. What we learned previously, and we've figured this out over decades and decades of going through certain illnesses, is that initially you have to be very cautious because the human body it's a magnificent thing, but it can fight off some of these viruses. But it has to have some of the antibodies, has to have some of the some type of trigger to tell your body, your immune system, to fight this. Well, we didn't have this early on in the initial stages. We do now. And they're saying that it's because of this hybrid immunity. Not necessarily because everyone has gotten the vaccine. It's because they've been infected at some point. They say like 99.8% of people in the world have been infected with COVID. So, pretty big news there. Here's the third reason, and this is one that I think is very interesting, and it is calling out California. There's many other articles, many other interviews, some research papers that have said this exact same thing, but I want to show it to you. It says this is the third reason why the CDC is going to change this. It says there are concerns that many people weren't following the isolation recommendations to begin with. And they quote, currently most people are not testing and isolating in the same manner as when the current isolation guidance was issued in 2021. Let me ask you this. You get a little cough, you get a sore throat, you get a slight fever. Are you going out there and taking a COVID test? Most people are saying no. They just don't do it. They don't do it like they used to. That's perfectly fine. But I want to read you the rest of this. It says most recently, some states, namely Oregon and California, had already broken away from the guidelines without appearing to have higher infections, deaths, or hospitalization rates. Right there, it's telling us. Okay, it's telling us that states are already moving away from this, mainly because they're tired of trying to follow what the CDC is doing. And many people have stated that the CDC is so far behind, about 3 years, that why are they going to listen to their recommendations? They should have updated this guidance years ago. Well, here's what I can tell you. The CDC is finally changing this. It's finally going to be changed. But now they're going to put more of the emphasis on and really making sure that you're safe and others are safe. But they're putting that on your shoulders. They're putting the responsibility back on the American people. They're not telling you that you have to mask up and you have to isolate for 5 days. No more. All they're saying is if you have a symptom, if you have a fever, just stay home for 24 hours with no medication. And if you are fine after that, go back to work, go back to school, live your normal life. Now, many people are going to come out and say that, well, this is only changing because of this election that's coming up in about 8 months. And yes, that could be a reason why, but is that going to be the real reason? Well, I don't think so. And here's the reason why experts believe this. Experts are saying that changing the guidance here does not really impact the election because of one thing. Everybody right now is looking at the U.S. southern border, this migrant crisis, not the COVID vaccine, not the COVID illness. The American people do not care about those things. You know, there some do, but the majority do not. They've moved past that. Still at this time, the people that should be aware of what's going on and who's sick around them versus who isn't are people that have some type of compromised immune system. That's really it. So elderly and young children, they should be the ones that are, and or parents necessarily, but should be the ones that are really staying vigilant and aware of what's going on around them, right? But that's what's happening at this time. I know a lot of people are very excited for this because now when people say, oh, you have a cold, you should go home for 5 days. When your work tells you that or school does, be like, no. The CDC has now changed that guidance. I have a little bit of a scratchy throat, nothing much. It's probably just a common cold. I can come to school. I can go to work, right? No big deal. And people can get back to their normal lives finally. So that's what happened today. As always, as I know more, which I don't think we're going to get any other changes to this guidance, I think that will be it. We're going to move forward with that. So with that said, hopefully it's putting this COVID situation behind us, but that is good news. So that's what we know at this time. Again, as always, if I find out anything extra, anything more, I promise I'll come back on, share all the latest news and updates. But that is what we know as of today. So again, thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.